Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about why it may not be so good for us to be an empath. And to do that, I'm going to talk about the difference between being an empath and empathy, and also the truth about empaths that the experts won't tell you. Now, to start with, let's define the difference between an empath and empathy. What happens with an empath is they absorb people's emotions. They become others' emotions. So, in other words, they could be feeling this way, and the second you introduce some sort of sensation, usually a person, it completely alters who they are inside. Empathy is completely different. Empathy is the ability to take somebody's story and hear it, equate it to something in your own life and go, wow, I remember feeling like that. And put yourself in their shoes and remember from your own experience what it was like to be going through something like that, and then join them. But do you hear the major difference between the two? Somebody with empathy never loses themselves. They stay contained. They are an individual, while an empath has no individuality. They are not a whole person. They become the other person. And now we get into the difficult part of this. And if you identify as an empath, I'm not here to disparage you. It's something I had to learn and own because this was me. But what the experts won't tell you is that being an empath is severely dysfunctional. And again, that's not a judgment. It's not meant to criticize. It's meant to help you. Now, to make it very simple to prove it to you, go to Google right now and just type in empath. And you're going to see countless articles about empaths, 10 characteristics, 15 characteristics, all these different things that signify what an empath is. And you're going to find some common themes. They'll say empaths absorb other people's emotions. They can become overwhelmed in intimate relationships. They have huge hearts, but sometimes they give too much. They're highly sensitive. They don't like conflict. They have a hard time setting boundaries. And it goes on and on like that. The energy really affects them. They tend to be loners. They need quiet time and to get away because everything is so draining. Now, I want you to Google codependence and look at the traits. See, an empath is not, unfortunately, we've made it this sign of courage or somehow it makes you better than somebody else, when in fact, if you look at what an empath is and what a codependent is, they're identical. An empath is somebody who's suffering from severe codependency. It is not healthy. It is not okay to be an empath. Did you hear? Remember the difference between an empath and empathy. It's not true empathy. It's a complete loss of self that gets, distorted by any person, place, or thing that comes into their environment. Well, that's not a good quality. Now, there are some good strengths of an empath. They tend to be more intuitive. But see, that's an internal process where they intuit, they observe, and they may pick up on things, but they don't become the thing. So there are some strengths to being an empath. Unfortunately, we are perpetuating this myth that to be an empath is healthy, it somehow makes you better than others, and is really something you want to strive for. No, we want to strive for empathy. We want to stay contained within ourselves and be able to look at our own personal experiences, hear somebody else's, and identify, but not lose ourselves. See, an empath has no sense of self. They become the selves of others. Well, that's highly dysfunctional. Could you imagine living that way? Like, that was me. Anywhere I went, I would become whatever everyone was around us. And if you watch some of my videos, I will talk about how I have this great gift, Well, it's not a gift. I had to finally own, oh my God, this is severe dysfunction. This isn't healthy at all, to lose myself and become what everyone else is around me. That's no way to live. You do have to isolate, and then you feel like you don't belong because you don't even belong to yourself. So this is a devastating thing, and here's what's even more devastating. When you Google empaths and you see the descriptions, the experts are therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists, and they're all describing themselves as this empath. And they're treating people, and they don't even, what that says is they don't know what codependence is. What that also means that anyone they treat, they're transferring that codependence into them. They're massively undereducated to be treating people. It doesn't mean they couldn't help in some instances, but they're completely unaware that what they're advocating is dysfunction and harmful to their clients. And these are the experts that we go to. And so my heart breaks for the information that's out there. There's a lot of misconceptions because we don't like to hear the truth. We don't like to hear about our perfect imperfections. And so what we do is we cover over them with false terms so that we don't have to face it. You know, I've talked about this before, stress. Everyone's stressed. Well, if you're stressed, you're in white hot fear. But if I tell you I'm stressed, it's this badge of courage, just like empath. Oh, I'm better than you. I do more than you. I work harder than you. That's why I'm so stressed. But if I tell you I'm afraid, oh, I can't admit that. No, that makes me weak. Well, no, it doesn't. What makes us weak is the avoidance of truth. And so this goes for people who are stressed or empaths. They're avoiding the truth. Now let's get to why that is. What's underneath this? Well, underneath an empath are two things: horrific trauma and shame. Now, unfortunately for most empaths, they'll be like, what do you mean trauma? My childhood was great. Well, you don't become an empath unless your childhood was filled with dysfunction. Because what happens is in childhood, we have no emotional boundaries. We are an open slate, and so we become whatever our parents' emotional condition is. Well, to justify our parents' imperfections, we condone how they were less than perfect and abusive. And so our parents transgressed our boundaries so much we don't have them. And so that's what I had to discover is with my mom's alcoholism and my dad's rage. The only way I could survive my childhood was to be hyper aware emotionally. I had to feel any sense of change in them so that I could survive. Now, again, that's a great skill, a survival skill for childhood. But it's a horrible skill once we become an adult because in the process of saving our lives, and that's the thing about an empath, again, this isn't to disparage. This was a life-saving coping skill that they developed. It's wonderful. It saved their life. Their childhood was filled with so much trauma. The problem is, as with all trauma, it boomerangs back against us as adults. And so now they can't be in relationships. They can't be in crowded rooms. They get overwhelmed. Well, they can't live their life. They're still stuck in that trauma. That's the first thing they're stuck in. The second thing is horrific shame. Just debilitating shame. Have you ever heard the phrase, kill somebody with kindness? Well, that's an empath. You know, not all, but many empaths are severely kind. And that's part of the badge of courage they sell is, oh no, I'm just too kind. People, just hurt me because I'm so kind. Well, that's something called a reaction formation, all right? When we go through severe trauma and severe shame, we will create a reaction formation. So we're creating a different formation of the reaction to protect ourselves, all right? So what this is in this case is a person who's an empath is repressing a disturbing feeling that would trigger that original shame they went through in trauma. Now they're doing this out of conscious awareness. They don't know this is what is happening to them. This is part of the maladaptive, false adaptive coping skill that they developed to survive childhood. So what ends up happening is the trait of kindness is developed to counteract an impulse to be cruel. Because underneath that shame is tremendous hurt, anger, and sadness that they want to lash out, all the anger and defense that they could never express as a child. And because they were bad, it would be, if they ever stood up for themselves, that wasn't they weren't allowed to do it. And so underneath this niceness is this deep desire of really wanting to react in a way. I'm going to say it's cruel. It's not. It would be perfectly imperfect, which might be cruel, but it's not their actual heart. Their heart is not to be cruel, but they're filled with so much pain and rage and shame, they might react in a cruel way. And we all do. We say things we don't want, or, in the spur of the moment, or, we physically react in ways that, aren't our true nature. It's just we're so filled with emotion we can't deal with. It explodes out. And so that's what they're stuffing. And if they ever experienced that shame, well, really the anger and the hurt and the pain, it would induce the shame. And so their reaction to it, to be cruel, they trigger together. And that's what they're trying to avoid, is the original wounding that's never been dealt with. And so it's the exact opposite of kindness. That's what they're feeling. So kindness basically is their defense to ensure they won't be cruel, and therefore they will avoid feeling that shame. So that trait of kindness will tend to be very rigid. It'll be very inappropriate, like they will get in relationships with narcissists. This is one of the key things with, people that attract narcissists in their life. They are stuffing so much shame under the guise of I'm an empath and I'm caring. I care about this person and I'm trying to help them, but it's not warranted. This person doesn't warrant that kindness, but that's their defense mechanism. That's how they hide their own shame. And therefore, this kindness is coercive. It's definitely manipulative, and it's thinly sadistic. It's actually cruelty, because think of how inauthentic it is to be nice to a narcissist. Now, a narcissist in recovery is one thing. Let me distinguish. I personally, a lot of people get upset with me, but I have a heart for anyone who's been in pain. I don't condone their behaviors like a narcissist. I don't let them off the hook, but their childhood created that. My heart breaks for that. But for those that have chosen not to do the work, I hold them accountable. And so if they're not putting action in place to heal their narcissism and the wounds that created it, well, there's not a reason to keep them in our life and be nice to them. That's the sadistic nature of the empath. Do you see what a manipulative power dynamic that is? Oh, but I care so much, and oh, they have so much potential, and I could love them out of it. That's sadistic, because they're also at the same time saying how awful the narcissist is and how great they are. That's why, in my video where I talk about the 7 characteristics of people that attract narcissists, they don't realize that act of kindness is actually just as manipulative and destructive and evil as the narcissism. You have 2 people manipulating each other. The narcissist is pretending, so is the so-called empath, a nice person, because they're out of touch with the reality that their niceness is actually sadistic and manipulative. It's meant to get control and to hold up the image that I'm nice and kind so they don't have to feel the overwhelming shame that's underneath it. So this is the person that kills with kindness. You see, if we're the empath and we're staying with an abusive person, narcissist, or anyone else, we're enabling the behavior. So do you see, we're playing a part and then continuing in this. If we take ourselves out of it, eventually this person will be forced to have to change. But see, we're staying. And that's how we are killing them, with kindness. We are adding to their pain because we won't face ours. And we use the narcissist, and trust me, this was me. I had to own this in myself, that I was using my narcissistic partners to avoid my own pain and shame. That's the underbelly. That's what's really going on that the experts won't tell you about empaths. That there's tremendous, horrific codependence, very dysfunctional codependence and shame. It is not a sign of strength and power and goodness to be an empath. It is to have empathy, Because empathy isn't manipulative, it's not sadistic. We contain ourselves within our boundaries. We don't lose ourselves and become sort of a chameleon and get absorbed. Because we're not, do you see, if I'm constantly affected by you, then then the person who's with me isn't in relationship with me, because I'm not even in me. So you can't be in relationship with a person who's not inside themselves. And that's an empath. They're not inside themselves. And so I find it heartbreaking that the industry is enabling these empaths to stay hurt. Look at the life of an empath alone. Dysfunctional relationships, pain, emptiness, constantly affected by other people. That's a horrific life experience. And these experts are condoning it and saying, oh no, you're good, you care so much. Well, yes, you do care, just incorrectly. An empath is not caring from a place of goodness. They're caring from a place of brokenness. Empathy is what we want to teach an empath. Now, how do we do that? Well, there's two things. Severe codependence recovery. And my suggestion for that is pick up Pia Melody's Facing Codependence. There isn't any of the other books you've read. I would encourage you, if you like them, wait till you read Facing Codependence. You're going to learn what codependence is really about and exactly how to recover from it. Also, John Bradshaw's The Shame That Binds. Pick that up because, as I said, underneath this is shame. For those of you, for your trauma, I would suggest my book, Your Journey to Success, because it'll help you unearth the trauma, especially if you don't feel like you've suffered any trauma in childhood. It'll bring you into reality, because ultimately an empath is suffering from the 5 core symptoms of codependence. The first one is low self-esteem, complete lack of boundaries, lack of self-care. They're out of touch with reality. They think their kindness and them being an empath is a trait of strength. They're out of reality that, no, this is severe dysfunction. And so, to equate it, to give it something, they think the sun is blue. They think being an empath is healthy, and it's not. They're out of touch with the reality that they are severe codependents and stuck in a severe dysfunctional state because of overwhelming shame and trauma. All right. And finally, core symptom number 5, a lack of maturity and moderation, because they can't be mature from that place of being disconnected with themselves. They can't act on moderation. They get sucked into anything and everything. All right. So if you want to heal your empath, I suggest you go to my site, www.thegreatnessuniversity.com. Go to the tab that says book recommendations. You'll see I've written book reviews on many of these books, and at the bottom, direct links to all 3 books. Pia Melody's Facing Codependence, John Bradshaw's The Shame That Binds, and my book, Your Journey to Success. So please, if you're an empath, yes, your heart is good, but the execution of your heart isn't what you intend it to be, and it is actually dysfunctional and hurtful to both you and the other person. And again, my heart breaks. You became an empath because of severe trauma. It was a defense mechanism. This isn't to denigrate you, it's to bring you into reality that if you choose to do the healing work, you can have genuine empathy, and the true nature of how wonderful your heart is can be expressed from empathy, but not as an empath. As an empath, your heart isn't expressed. It's, as I said, manipulative and thinly sadistic, because you're actually hurting people with your kindness. It's not genuine and authentic. It's destructive to both people involved. Okay? So if I haven't upset too many people with that information, please like this. Leave me your comments. You may disagree. But if you do that, like I said, just Google the 2 terms and you're going to see an empath is a severe codependent. And that will at least start bringing you into reality. And finally, if you know an empath who is actually a severe codependent and is open to growth and change and actually wants to get to true empathy, they want their real heart to be shown, please share it with them. And as I always say, enjoy the journey.